I have myself a new toy, a clip-on microphone, so I can go out walking and record. So just to have a try out of it, I thought I would go on a fairly common walk I used to do during the lockdowns, which I call the circuit. The walk starts at Roscoe's roundabout and Boundary Bridge, which is the border between Cheadle Heath and Cheadle. And crossing over Heathside Park Road, going towards the Junction 2 motorway junction of the M60. Up the footbridge we go. To cross the motorway junction. And from the top of the footbridge we can see down into the beech grove of Abney Hall Park. Which we'll now walk down to. And so we are now in the beech grove. We can take three ways here. The main route straight through the park is on the tarmacked path, but there is a path to the left and a path to the right. Although it's next to the motorway, I prefer the path to the right. As no doubt you can hear, it's not the quietest of paths because of the traffic. This path does get quite muddy sometimes, but it is passable today. The hawthorn is still out. There's a lot of wildflowers still around, which is good to see. And we're now coming round where we can look over a small nature reserve. I particularly like this section down the steps through all the trees. We have a choice here. We can either go up or go down. I like to go down past the pond, or one of the ponds I should say. Oh, and there's a duck on the pond. 2 ducks. A good old sycamore. I can hear lots of birds singing, but I can't actually see any to take photos of. Here we are at another site overlooking the small nature reserve. But we'll continue along the path towards the hall itself. We have now come to the point where our motorway junction actually meets the motorway, and it's got a lot noisier. There's the road that leads to the hall, but we're going down the steps to one of the large ponds. And so here is one of the large ponds. And a baby duckling. So we leave the pond now, and I'll just take a short detour around the hall. Abney Hall was built in 1847, but unfortunately the person who was having it built died before it was completed, and Sir James Watts bought it. Sir James Watts was a prominent Manchester mill owner, and just to keep things simple, he named his son James, and that son, James Watts, married the sister of Agatha Christie, and they had a son which they called James. The James Watts, who was the nephew of Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie stayed here many times and actually used it in a couple of her stories. We're now about to leave Abney Hall Park. The next part of the walk is probably less picturesque. Here is Abney's main entrance, and we now go alongside Manchester Road, which you might be surprised to hear goes to Manchester. And here we are at crossing the motorway. Next we cross the bridge over the old Cheshire Lines Railway at the old Cheadle Station. From there you could get trains to places like Lymm and Southport, and the other way the terminus was Stockport Tiviot Dale. You can see where the line bends in the distance. Would have been a junction there and the line would have gone straight on to Stockport, but the bend to the right takes the trains now through Chidelhoe Station by Morrison's, and so we continue on to the River Mersey. Although the walk is by a busy road, there are some nice views around. This is Parswood School's sports field, or one of their sports fields, and so we come to the River Mersey. I do like standing in this spot because if we go back a few years, I would have 1 foot in Lancashire and 1 foot in Cheshire. Of course now, because we're in Greater Manchester, the boundary is just between Manchester and Stockport. We're now going to walk down the path by the Mersey. We're now approaching an interesting group of trees on this bend in the river. Until February this year, these trees were in fact on an island in the river. But when the river flooded in February-March time, the debris it brought along, it actually brought a small tree down as well and totally blocked the way the water ran through. And so part of it, the little stream, if you like, a streamlet one side, is virtually dried up. You can carry on the path by the river, but I just want to take a slightly shortcut across a field where they've just built a new cycle path, just to have a look at the cowslips. There is where the blockage is, so that this ditch no longer has water in. Oh well, buttercups seem to have become more prominent than the cowslips. cowslips seem to have finished flowering now. And so we join the path by the river again. There appear to be a lot of solar panels in that field by the sewer. Continuing on by the weir. The next section takes us past a field of horses. You can see on the far side of the field an embankment full of hawthorns. That in fact is an old railway that went from Manchester Central via Cheadle Heath on the famous Blue Pullman all the way to St Pancras. The line would have crossed the Mersey here and carried on to meet the line we saw earlier at Cheadle Heath Morrison's, which we'll visit towards the end of the walk. We're about to cross the M60 again, but this time underneath it. This is the last little stretch by the river before we cross it at Gauzy Bank Bridge. You might just be able to make out the bridge through the trees. And somewhere down there is Stockport Town Centre. Oh, that's the end of the pretty part of the walk. We've just come into the new Aurora Business Park, and we're going to cross over into Cheadle Heath Park. We now come out on Stockport Road and follow that all the way back to Roscoe's roundabout. And we're now coming up to the bridge that crosses the railway line we crossed earlier. This is at Chidelhoe Station now. And over there is where Smith's Crisps factory used to be, for those who remember Smith's Crisps. Opposite is Go Outdoors, which was very handy when I was doing the Trans-Pennine Trail. And on this side of the road is Oldie. There's not much left to say now. I see the Farmer's Arms has closed. And this, I suppose you might say, is like the centre of Cheadle Heath. And so we're on the last stretch. Going down, you can just make out Boundary Bridge and Roscoe's Roundabout, where we started the walk.